Good afternoon, and thank you for attending the 13th Annual William C. Moran Address. This event honours Dr. William C. Moran, or Dean Moran, as he was known to many at Francis Marion. Dr. Moran was Academic Vice President of Francis Marion College from 1978 to 1992, and left us to become president of Lander University. He dedicated his life to education and, amongst other accolades, received the Order of the Palmetto in 2000 and the Governor's Award in the Humanities in 2008. This year's address will be presented by Professor Emerita Dr. Lynn Hanson and is titled Learning by Doing, From Pretending to Becoming. Lynn began her career at FMU in 1998 and was coordinator of the professional writing program for many years, and more recently, co-director of the Bell Baruch Institute for South Carolina Studies, before retiring in 2020. Originally from Alabama, Lynn received her BA and MA in English from Auburn University and her PhD in drama from the University of Georgia. Please welcome Dr. Lynn Hanson. Lynn.
Thank you, Peter. Hi. To the Moran family, students, colleagues, members of our community, thank you for attending today. Thank you to the Faculty Life Committee for inviting me to deliver the Moran Address, and to my friend Sean Miller for overseeing this process. Just a few months after the pandemic forced us all to isolate and work from home, my planned retirement in May of 2020 simply transformed into a disappearing act. The calendar flipped, poof, a vapor. I was retired, and we moved to the beach. I thought that was that. I thought I might never see you again. But a little over a year later, our associate provost, Allison Stedman, called and asked me to come back to work part-time for the Baruch Institute for South Carolina Studies. My duties are now based at Hobcaw Barony across the river from Georgetown, so my work is still pretty close to home. Then about 2 months ago, our provost, Peter King, asked me to make this speech, which means I do get to see you again, and I'm really happy for that. Y'all look good. I consider this a great opportunity, the Moran Address, a big speech. Peter, are you aware what you have done? I could say anything up here and it would be out before you could stop me. I am grateful and surprised to find myself here, but I will seize this moment because I do have some things to say to my students, my colleagues, and members of our community. Keep in mind that even though I have moved to the beach, you will always be my students, my colleagues, and my community. So now here's one more thank you to the community friends that I count as family. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your acceptance of an oddball academic, a kind of countrified girl who inexplicably loves Shakespeare and Robert Frost, who often dresses badly and likes to dig in the yard. Thank you for defending my dispositions. You know who you are, but you may never know how much your acceptance has meant to me. Now, for those in the community who don't know me as well, let me assure you of this. I might be a little different, but I'm not dangerous. In fact, I'm as common as grass. Together with my academic colleagues, we are as threatening as the front lawn. We want to help your children prepare for life, to fend for themselves and earn a living, and to succeed in the endeavors they choose for themselves. As academics, we study all kinds of minutiae, little teeny-tiny things like molecules, fractals in iambic pentameter and Shakespeare's sonnets. We also study big things, like the vast expanse of solar systems beyond our own, seismic waves, satellite technology, the influences of class, race, and gender. We compare state education standards. We look for correlations between religious upbringing and civic engagement. We untangle rhetoric that's designed to confuse and thwart whole populations. And this is not just because we're nerds, although some of us are. You here in Florence and throughout the PD region and from across our beautiful state, you are the community that my colleagues and I want to serve. We want to share our skills, our practices, and the results of careful, reliable study with you and your children. We want to share something that maybe just might be relevant someday. Something that can make our community, our shared world, even better. When I was a little girl, my brother and I used to follow my daddy across the farm to check on fences and fruit trees. Sometimes the most direct route required us to go through a daunting briar patch with long, wicked thorns and stiff, husky stems higher than my daddy's head. I remember facing that forest of thorns and thinking, I'll never make it through there. But my daddy had thick khaki pants, big, heavy boots, and he could lift his foot as high as his waist and press against those thorns and force them down. As he did that, he made a pathway for my brother and me. We followed along behind him with the briars underfoot as if Daddy had just parted the Red Sea. This image of my dad parallels the role that professors can play when we pursue projects in our fields and bring students along with us, opening a path from the academy to the workplace. I view teaching like this. For as long as I am able, I want to lift up my feet and push down the briars, reach around for my students and wave them forward and say, this is the way we go, kids. This is how we do it. And when I get old and retired, and I've gone as far as I can, I want to give my boots to my colleagues. Although truthfully, I don't think I am entirely finished. My community, college professors want the same things that you do. We believe in trying to understand the problems and mysteries of our world. We think knowledge helps us do that. We believe in teaching the value of research, logic, science, and facts. We want your children to prosper, and we think a solid education will help them. And by the way, my mama has always thought so too. My mother wanted a college education, and she tried her best to pursue it. But the demands of becoming a wife and raising a family got in her way. After earning a high school diploma, my mom was just 3 months into her college coursework when my grandmother found out that her daughter was planning to get married. So Mama pulled her out of school. She said, there's no sense paying tuition if that's what you're going to do. Things were different then. Mama came home, married Daddy, started a family, and managed our home. When we were older, about 11 and 12, my mother began working part-time and then full-time to earn extra money, first for necessities, then for nice things, and later for our college tuition. Only when my brother and I were out of the house did Mama try taking courses again at the local community college. In the process, she discovered that a real estate license would prove more lucrative, so that's the license she earned. And she did very well. So I don't think she has any regrets. But the last time I went home to Alabama, she talked about how much she really wanted that university credential, and her insistence on its value has never waned. My mother wanted just one college degree, and that's why I have 3. My community. This story surely has a familiar ring. So many of you have worked hard to give your children more than you had for yourselves in all kinds of ways. My colleagues and I understand this, and we want to help. My students, your parents push you to get an education so that you will have what you need to leave home for good. Then they can do what they always wanted to do before you were born. So I enrolled at Auburn University, failed the chemistry portions of my biology classes, and chose to major in English without an inkling of its relevance to my career. I never even considered the job of teaching. But just one short year after graduating, I found myself missing school, the same institution I had dreamed of leaving since the 4th grade. I couldn't believe it. Those university classrooms where everyone tried to make sense of the world beckoned me back. So in January 1979, I enrolled in a master's program in English, once again at Auburn University. We've all heard the common advice given to novices, just fake it till you make it. Although being unprepared has never appealed to me, this is how I started my teaching career, masquerading as a graduate teaching assistant in the English department. My assignment was to teach freshman composition every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. with absolutely no orientation or training whatsoever. They gave me a textbook and a sample syllabus, and they pushed me out in front of a room full of students. So I tried to imitate the actions of my own composition teachers when I was a freshman. Mostly, I learned by doing. A few years later, I graduated with a master's degree and entered the job market when English teachers were a dime a dozen. They still are. Try as I might, I couldn't snare a full-time position with any longevity. On the advice of a trusted professor, I offered my writing and editing skills to the computer industry, more specifically, to a small local software company. Again, without any knowledge of computers and computer jargon, I wrote the instructions for a video game called Jaybird, which was suspiciously similar to Pac-Man, except that the board was turned sideways and there was a bird in it. It was rinky-dink at best, but I was getting real experience. Almost a year later, it was enough to land me an interview at IBM. In July 1984, I hit the big league in Austin, Texas, and they called me an Associate Information Developer, which is a fancy name for technical writer. It's not bad for a title, and it's not bad for a kid who wasn't smart enough not to major in English. But when I started that job at IBM, there were a couple of problems. Actually, some pretty big problems. Number one, I didn't really want that job. I just needed the salary. And as whimsical as that Jaybird game had been, I really didn't care about computers. Software? Hardware? Pfft, those manuals are dry as snuff, and nobody wants to read them anyway. So I didn't care about what I was supposed to produce. Years later, I told my students that employers don't actually pay them for their work. Employers pay them to care about their work. That makes the difference between simply doing a task and doing it well. But what do you do when you really don't care whether every hamburger has 3 pickles, or every rental car has clean tires, or the screws on a widget are tight, or the grammar in your email is correct? Students, here's the answer. Employers will pay you to pretend to care. And then, lucky for us, if we keep pretending over time, one day we become the good, high-quality workers we once only pretended to be. That's what I did. I was an imposter. I was an actor for IBM. But remember, there was another problem. I'd never been taught how to write a manual or a business report or even a memo. In those days, that kind of content didn't even exist in English departments. No one had ever taught me why that kind of writing matters so much. So I floundered and flailed in my misery and learned to pretend a little better. Forced into industry, immersed in corporate culture, and required to play a new role, I began to learn the standard expectations, the processes, the work cycles, and the collaboration that's required to produce anything worth buying. For 3 years, I pretended to be an associate information developer for IBM, and here's what happened. Doing a job that I didn't know how to do finally taught me how to do it. Pretending to meet professional standards taught me a lot about professionalism and the standards that needed to be taught in English departments and schools of business. By living as an imposter, I was adding an entirely new discipline to my English teacher's repertoire. By pretending to care, I came to care. By playing a role, I became the role. It was that brief stint in industry, that 3-year impostership at IBM, that ultimately opened an opportunity for full-time teaching at the Pennsylvania College of Technology. The English department at Penn College wanted me to teach the courses that I should have completed before I ever started working at IBM. At Penn College, the institutional mission was to teach each subject and emphasize its application in professional environments. The college embodied a successful marriage between academic study and workplace preparation, ushering students toward practical ways to earn a living. So without ever taking a course in technical communication, I began to teach it, impostering again, living up north in a land where nobody pronounced pecan pie like I did. Teaching an unfamiliar course in technical writing had a profound effect. For one thing, as I chirped in class 5 days each week about the necessity for effective technical communication, I came to appreciate my own subject matter. And that's a pretty significant transformation for a kid who majors in English because she likes poetry, fiction, and drama. I came to appreciate how very much a writer's good writing can help people understand complicated information, how their struggle to interpret could be aided by my ability to translate complex information for them. The pure appeal of logic and strategy grew deeper. The planning required to implement group projects in class took on new meaning, as if it were a map for community improvement. The former teenager who preferred painting fences in a pasture with only horses for companions learned the value of collaborating with colleagues. By pretending to value, I learned to respect. Working at the Pennsylvania College of Technology inspired my belief in experiential learning and then confirmed it. Our students often question why teachers assign chapters to read and exercises to complete and papers to write that even teachers don't want to read. People with good old-fashioned common sense, after all, know that all of us learn through experience. My students, here's the answer. Your professors design experiences for you to live through so that you can learn something. Granted, we can't always control what that something will be, but you'll learn, even from misfires and misunderstandings. You can even learn from doing nothing, for inaction has its consequences too. So to be fair, reading and taking quizzes and practicing exercises are perfectly reasonable places to start. Those are experiences too. Obviously, students have to learn the scales on the piano before they can compose a sonata. But reading about the work of scientists, engineers, psychologists, and managers, and talking about those fields won't really drive home the realities. Only real experience does that. After the reading and the talking, the practicing and simulating, then comes actually doing and being. To prepare students to be full-time employees in something, somewhere, professors need to introduce them to the professional expectations in their chosen fields. We design experiences that gradually increase in demands, overlaying study in a discipline with simulated workplace experiences, and eventually requiring professional level work. My students, I want you to know this. Each teacher offers you a unique perspective. Each one brings everything they are to the classroom. They bring their knowledge, observations, experiences, and analysis as gifts they can offer every day. My students, your job during these years is to receive the gifts your teachers try to give you every day. I know sometimes you don't want those particular gifts. You want the grades that convey those gifts have already been received, the credential that confers a right to passage. You want to become something besides a student, and you're eager to get started. I know. All your teachers know. We're not trying to hold you back. We're trying to help you get there. And we want you to be ready, well prepared to tackle the problems that will be flung in your path. Oh yes, my darlings, there will be problems. That's why they call it work. Francis Marion University raises the bar for our students by fostering this potential to do real work. I am grateful to the administration for this approach and feel fortunate to have been a part of it. In 2005, the president and provost asked me to serve as the faculty coordinator for our report to the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, submitted every 10 years. That's the report that keeps our university accredited and ensures the degrees we confer are meaningful. When the provost and I discussed this work assignment, I asked if I could hire students to assist me. Dr. Chapman was skeptical that undergraduates could be helpful in generating such crucial content, but he said I could try. During that 3-year process, 13 paid students helped me coordinate the work of 5 committees and track the progress of 81 contributing reports drafted by over 200 faculty and staff. The students helped me develop style guidelines for consistency, chase down writers who owed me a draft. Y'all, I have never seen so many people run from me on campus. The students helped me review drafts for missing content, and they conducted interviews to go get it. They made corrections, they cited sources, they wrote follow-up emails and status reports, and ultimately they assisted with printing and packaging the final 2-volume accreditation report. The undergraduates did it. They helped me facilitate a 3-year documentation project that really mattered. They were there working with me through the entire process, working for the university from within the university to prove the university's worth. That work experience with those undergraduates was one of the best teaching experiences of my life. When our report was complete in 2008, it included a plan for promoting experiential learning across the curriculum. I like to think those 13 students reflected the inspiration for that plan. The goal was to expand familiar programs like community service, travel study, internships, and research assistantships, and to create new professional opportunities for students, such as presenting their research at national conferences and participating in national competitions like the Model UN. The university funds these student experiences while also increasing faculty development. These two efforts go hand in hand, and Francis Marion provides for both. When faculty have opportunities for research, their students can work alongside them, and often our communities realize the benefits also. FMU encourages professors to systematically integrate professional experiences in every level of our undergraduate degree programs. I am impressed by this. And here's my favorite. The Baruch Institute for South Carolina Studies, based at Hobcaw Barony. And you will see, my colleagues, it's not far from Florence down to Georgetown. All you gotta do is cross that river. Formally established in 2017, the Baruch Institute for South Carolina Studies promotes interdisciplinary research on the cultural and historical heritage of South Carolina, starting with Hobcaw Barony's 16,000 acres of protected property. My colleagues, previous scholars, and Hobcaw staff have already identified approximately 100 historic sites on the property, and more are waiting to be uncovered. The Baruch Institute invites scholars to study Hobcaw's resources, publish their findings, and present educational programs for students and the public. I began working at Hobcaw over a decade ago because I was envious of my colleagues in the sciences. My biology buddies often led student trips to study things like snakes and yucca plants and saltwater terrapins. Because I was an English teacher, I looked for documentation projects that Hobcaw Barony needed, and then I pitched the idea that my students could write them. And they did. They developed brochures describing Bell Baruch's legacy, designed outdoor kiosks with information about historic sites. They created handheld fans to leave on the pews of the church in Friendfield Village with information about life in the villages. They even created table runners featuring the famous guests who dined at Hobcaw House and Belfield House. Every project required tours of the property, research and source citations, multiple drafts, and review cycles. Each project required professional printing and packaging, presentations to clients for approval. Let me be clear. My students weren't qualified to do professional level work. Sometimes they made mistakes and produced mediocre drafts. But through those mistakes and through the pressure of meeting client expectations, they learned how to pretend better, producing good things on their way to becoming the professionals they aspired to be. While I acted as their project manager, they acted as employees would, knowing that whenever we needed to, we could shift back to the roles of teacher and students. During one of these class tours of Hobcaw Barony, our staff guide took us through Bell Baruch's house. We pushed open every door and stepped over scattered debris in the party room, the guest rooms, and the servants' wing with a wood-burning stove. We ducked under cobwebs in the basement and in the bomb shelter retrofitted in the 1950s for an atomic attack. Those kids won't forget exploring and discovering, seeing firsthand. But the most important thing we saw in the basement that day was in another room where 4 wooden trunks lined the walls. Strewn all around were papers, letters, envelopes stuffed with receipts, brown folders full of financial statements, and lots of old checkbooks. We wanted to dive in, but we couldn't until we had permission to move the documents upstairs, clean them, record them, and carefully archive them for conservation. When we finally received approval for our study, we focused first on the checkbooks, 26 of them, dating from 1940 to 1961. Do you know how much you can learn about a person by looking at her checkbooks? We learned about Belle Brooks' pastimes, travels, and relationships, her cares and accomplishments, and her notable philanthropy. We learned that she purchased 7 airplanes in a span of 8 years, 2 of them conscripted for World War II and never returned, which made her mad. We learned about the economic impact of her wealth on the state of South Carolina. Belle Baruch is worth knowing as one of our state's significant benefactors. And there's so much more, not just about Belle. Hobcaw Barony is filled with fascinating characters who lived there, worked there, and visited as guests. Its history over the decades would make a scrumptious television series for Masterpiece on PBS. Upstairs, downstairs, all around the house. In the parlor, generals and ambassadors plotted wartime strategies. In the kitchen, Winston Churchill pilfered midnight snacks. Down in the villages, a woman called Mocking had her baby stolen away. Minnie Kennedy grew up resenting the Baruchs, while Robert McClary hid his love for his humble home because he didn't think his children would understand. Over at the stable, the horse trainer's daughter flirted with a guest. Months later, they ran off together. Out beyond Clambank Landing, the Keynes brothers poached oysters and ducks. You can search farther back, too, like Dr. Barton and his archaeology students who found Native American shards and a Civil War button during a recent dig. The story of slavery at Hobcaw Barony is begging to be told. Or if your interests lie in technology, you can restore audio tapes of old interviews and recreate the conversations that at this moment are as good as lost, but with technology, we can bring them back. Or like Dr. Renew and his students, you can use 3D printing to make replicas of artifacts too delicate to display. I will gladly share a list of projects with any of you who are interested. My colleagues, almost 6,500 artifacts at Hobcaw Barony are cataloged in an online inventory. Pottery, tools, maps, furniture, clothing, letter, photographs, objects of all kinds. I have a plan for making that database more accessible and user-friendly. Frankly, I need some of you to help me, faculty and students. There could be thousands more artifacts that need to be recorded and archived. Despite the valiant work of Hobcaw's loyal staff for decades, there is more research that needs to be done. There are discoveries to be made, so much more knowledge to move into the academy and into the public square. The invitation is open. You can conduct primary research at Hobcaw Barony and take your students with you. You can show them how academic research is like detective work, turning up new clues that need to be recorded and presented at conferences, and that will inform the public tours and special programs that tourists from everywhere pay to attend. The information our students pursue can make it to the public square. We aren't limited to papers that everyone throws away at the end of the year. We can do more by expecting our students to do more. So now my students. While the university is raising the bar and teachers are trying to get you ready, some of you might be sitting in your chairs thinking, I don't need this. Why do I have to study this? I'm never going to use this. I thought so too. But the truth is, we never know what we're going to need. Tomorrow's future is as obscure as a dense thicket of thorns. So, I want to assure you that everything is relevant and everything fits. The successes and the failures in school and in work and in life, the incongruities, the contradictions, the zigzagging across divergent pathways. A human life embodies them all, and your careers can unify them. The contributions we make during our working lives will draw upon everything we have ever encountered and experienced. But the career itself is defined by what we can give. My PhD is in drama, and I usually keep that quiet because it sounds irrelevant. But here I am, standing on a stage, pretending to be someone worth listening to. Those additional years in graduate school turned out to be very useful. Studying how actors might play their roles, studying the roles they embodied in each setting, studying the settings that demanded those roles from them. Sometimes we survive by pretending. Sometimes we prosper. To my students, to my colleagues, and to my community, all of us can pretend and become what we want to be, what we need to be. We can be even more and even better than we already are. This is the way we do it. This is how we go. Let's all go and do well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. You're a master teacher still, right? And that was inspiring, and thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to ask the chair of the faculty, Professor Gawley, to come with and I think make a little presentation.
Oh, yeah?
A professor of theater. This is just a token of appreciation from the Academy.
Oh, thank you, Glenn. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. This is really beautiful. Look at this.
It's a clock.
It's a clock.
Even though you don't have to get to class at 7 in the morning.
Oh, darn.
You can Thank you all for coming today. I think we've got a reception just outside. Please stay around. Lynn will be outside, and I know she wants to talk to all of you out there. So thank you for coming.